Hi, welcome to the MergeLane On-Ramp Live series. This episode is the Startup Gas Pedal. What is an accelerator and is it right for us? Hosted by MergeLane co-founder and active angel investor Elizabeth Kraus, with special guest Brad Bernthal, a leading researcher on investment accelerators.
So my name is Elizabeth Kraus, and I'm an active angel investor and the co-founder of MergeLane, a program designed to discover, accelerate, and invest in exceptional women and the companies they run. MergeLane recruits companies from all over the world and chooses 10 select high-growth companies with at least one woman in leadership for its intense 12-week accelerator program. We make an investment in those companies and match them with mentors and other investors and transformative coaches to accelerate their business and prove that investing in women isn't just the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. Today, we're going to talk about startup accelerators. So what is an accelerator and is it right for your startup? I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of a mentor for several accelerators, an investor in accelerator participants, and the co-founder of MergeLane, which is an accelerator. And then I'm very excited to have Brad Bernthal with us today. He's actually one of the world's leading experts on accelerators. And so, Brad, can you join us and give us just a brief overview of your background?
Sure. First, delighted to be doing the webinar. Thanks for inviting me, Elizabeth, as well as for charitably describing me as a world expert. That's nice. I'm at the University of Colorado at Boulder. I'm housed in the law school where I teach in the areas of entrepreneurial law and innovation policy. And I also am a director for our Silicon Flatiron Center's entrepreneurship initiative, which creates a high velocity of interaction between CU Boulder and the Front Range's world-class startup community. I'm also a mentor in Techstars and have been a mentor there since 2008. And as Elizabeth mentioned, I've been researching accelerators and have, over the last year, visited with folks from about 25 to 30 different accelerators, mostly in the United States.
Fabulous. Thanks, Brad. So Brad and I are going to speak for about 30 minutes or so, and then we're going to turn it over to audience Q&A for the second half of our session. So if you have questions as we go along, feel free to use the chat function to send us our way so we can keep them in the queue. And then once we open it up to questions, it'd be great if you turn on your video so we can actually see you while you speak. And you guys can just unmute yourself when you have questions as well. So Brad, I'm very excited to have you here today because you've just published this extensive research on accelerators. But before we get started, can you just explain what an accelerator actually is?
Happy to. I think the best way to think about an accelerator is it's somewhat of a Frankenstein of different existing parts of the startup community that have been brought into one institution. So the defining elements are, one, like an angel investor, investment accelerators such as MergeLane will provide money to an early stage company in exchange for some piece of equity. So that's factor number one. Number two is somewhat like, say, a graduate school program. An accelerator will bring in a cohort of companies at the same time and then exit them at the same time, usually about a 3 to 4 month duration in terms of the program. Three is in terms of the way accelerators provide expertise to companies. There's a really interesting model that many of them use where mentors are relied upon. Mentors are experts, typically serial entrepreneurs, investors, functional specialists who provide help and hands-on assistance to the companies during their time in the accelerator. Finally, a little bit like an incubator, the accelerators usually physically co-locate the companies, at least for some period of the program. I know with MergeLane, there are periods in which the companies are physically present in Boulder and other periods in which the companies are geographically dispersed. Elizabeth, what'd I miss?
No, I think that's a pretty comprehensive definition. Thanks for that. So can you also tell us just a little bit about how you obtained the research, just so we have some framing?
Sure. As I mentioned, this grew out of my role somewhat as a participant observer here. I've been a Techstars mentor going back to 2008. And then a couple of years ago, I realized that accelerators are now probably the most important institutional innovation in startups of the 21st century. So I started to conduct research, most of which has been done through a series of interviews. As I mentioned, I probably canvassed at this point somewhere between 25 and 30 accelerators overall, and have done in the range of 50 to 60 individual interviews. There's three particular types of accelerator participants that I've spoken with. The first is managing directors and founders of accelerators, people like Elizabeth and her co-founder Sue. Second, mentors, those people who are helping startups that are participating in accelerators. And third, entrepreneurs and founders, those that are bringing their companies under the umbrella of the accelerator.
Great, thanks, Brad. And then can you explain how accelerators differ from other startup support systems?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So one, and I think you just put the slide on in terms of ways to differentiate accelerators along. If you look at the far left column, those are attributes of accelerators. And then as you go over to the right, you'll see differences as they're distinguished between accelerators, and in order, let's see, angels, venture capitalists, incubators, venture capitalists, and then angel investors. So for example, a competitive application with accelerators, sometimes you'll see admission as less than 1% of applicants can get into an elite accelerator. Commonly, you'll see less than 10% admission. That's, for example, in contrast to an incubator, which tends to be less competitive, but the barrier to entry there is the ability to pay some sort of rent. Venture capitalists are also super selective, and then angels, it really depends. If you go down the list, you'll see other ways that we can differentiate accelerators from other institutions. One of the important ones, if you skip down to the fourth row, is certification functions. And that is, entrepreneurial institutions perform a role of validating, hey, this is a serious team with a serious idea that differentiates high quality entrepreneurs from others. And I think that's an important role that accelerators are playing these days, where companies that come through them have proven over the course of 2 or 3 months that they're serious about improving their idea. It's an opportunity for them to work closely with mentors. And both the accelerator and the mentors then certify the quality of those companies to the broader community, which can be investors, customers, suppliers, other potential employees. So that's an important function that accelerators are performing.
Great, thanks so much, Brad. So just a couple quick things with the Join.me platform. So I apologize for those of you who have said that you can't quite see the slides, but Brad, where can people find your research that includes this chart?
Wow. So for those that are having trouble sleeping, there's nothing that's a better cure for insomnia like a good law review article. And as a follow-up, Elizabeth, can we send out the link to the SSRN link where it's published right now?
Yeah, we'll do that. Absolutely. And we'll also send a recording to this. And if people have questions, then let me know. Most of our other slides are more just talking points. But this chart is pretty helpful. Great. So thanks for helping to define that. Accelerator programs are really increasing in popularity. And so one of the questions that we get a lot is, why do companies actually participate in them? So there's a couple reasons. One of the main reasons is because you actually accelerate your business. Accelerators are an opportunity to dedicate a focused period of time to accelerate your business and it's amazing to see the kind of shifts that happen. So in our last MergeLane cohort, for example, every company made a pretty big shift. As a result of mentor feedback, for example, one company determined that the founders needed to completely change their roles, and making that shift made a huge difference in their ability to raise capital and acquire customers. Another company realized that their initial target market was going to be a really tough nut to crack. So they changed their market focus, and within weeks, they saw tremendous interest for their product and were able to sign on 13 large companies as users, including Nordstrom, American Express, and Deloitte. Brad, do you have any examples of companies that you've worked with or have seen that have made some pretty tremendous shift as a result of their accelerator participation?
Yeah, so maybe I'll highlight a couple other general factors and then give a few specific examples, Elizabeth. In terms of reasons to participate in accelerators, obviously outside capital is often a driver, but I think most teams that come through accelerators feel like the hands-on expertise that you get from the managing directors, as well as the outside help from your team of mentors, is ultimately the key value proposition that makes accelerators worth it or not. So with that in mind, in terms of pivots that I've seen, a good example is a company that I mentored out of Techstars last year was originally called Native. What they were trying to do is sell software into universities, and this software ideally would connect students using algorithms with events of interest on and around the campus. They quickly realized that selling into universities was probably going to be a road to slow death, just given that it's not easy to sell and university sales cycles are slow. And so they pivoted into a travel company. They just closed on $1.3 million today. Excited to see what they're doing. I think that's a good example that's a company that would have followed a losing business model for a long period of time had they not assembled a team of advisors that got them out of that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, great example. That company's made a huge shift, and very excited to see where they go. So, the other main benefit is really the network of the the network of the accelerator, which includes several different people, one of which is the mentors. So, Brad, can you explain a little bit about all of the stakeholders that are involved in the Accelerator Network?
Yeah. So if you look at mentors, and Elizabeth, I suspect that the MergeLane list of mentors is on your website. Is that right?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So you're going to see three major groups of mentors. One are mentors who are serial entrepreneurs. That is, people who have been through a cycle of companies, ideally one success and one failure or more. Second are mentors who are investors and are interested in helping and also may want to eventually take a stake in the company. And third are mentors who are functional specialists, usually people who have a domain of expertise, say lawyers or technologists, marketing, sales specialists, etc. You might be able to create a fourth category of potpourri, someone like myself who's an academic and might have some expertise along those lines, or it can be connectors in the communities. Those are, I think, the major four categories of mentors. One interesting feature of the research, and this is not my research, this is other academic research, is I would have thought accelerators would be most helpful to inexperienced first-time entrepreneurs. There is research emerging that's suggesting that that experienced entrepreneurs, or at least people who have done a company before, may actually be getting as much or more value out of accelerators. One theory about that is they know how to use the outside help, maybe in a way that's more sophisticated than first-time entrepreneurs. That's at least something that's, it's still an open question, but interesting to me that might be something that's emerging.
Great point. So just a reminder, if you guys are not speaking, can you please mute yourself? And just to kind of second that point, we've definitely seen that through the the first class of MergeLane, and I've seen that with quite a few of the companies that I've been working with. So, once they're a little bit further along, they can actually execute on some of the connections that are made for them in the accelerator, and that's provided pretty tremendous value to the companies that I've been working with.
Yeah.
Great. So let's just kind of dig in a little bit to some of these parties in the network. So we also have the mentors. And Brad, maybe you can just quickly define what an accelerator mentor is.
So if you think about ultimately the function of the accelerator is to get expertise to your company. And if you're the accelerator, there's really three different ways that you could organize that expertise. One is you can hire for it. That is, you bring, say, an entrepreneur in residence full-time within the accelerator who in turn advises and works with your company. Second is you could contract for it. That is, you could pay mentors or experts in the area, maybe a piece of equity or money to come work with companies. But it's super interesting to me that the predominant model that's prevailing is a group of volunteer experts that come and work with companies. And so by and large, most mentors neither have a contract with the accelerator, nor will they have a contract directly with your company. And to me, that's a fascinating phenomena where, on the one hand, you are sharing the secrets of your company with mentors who are not getting paid, and in turn, they're providing real, meaningful material value in terms of connections and insight to companies in a very sharing sort of way. That's a fascinating set of circumstances in which high prestige individuals are providing their time to companies really for free, which is a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In MergeLane, we actually had to turn away highly qualified mentors because we had so many people that wanted to work for free, and they get a lot out of it as mentors, but it is continually amazing to me. So, from my experience, good mentors can offer tremendous value from everything from making an introduction to a potential customer to helping to completely redesign a product. To give a few specific examples from our last class, so one of our companies was looking for a celebrity to endorse their product, and one of our mentors was actually able to connect them with Pink, the artist. Another company was a mapping technology, and we were able to match them with a mentor with 30 years of both technical and acquisition experience in their industry. And so the mentor was able to help the company uncover a $4 billion market opportunity and really walk them through the milestones they needed to hit to raise capital and potentially be acquired. So, just to move on to another
Elizabeth, can I say one more thing about mentors before we leave that topic? Which is, for some on the call, this might be surprising, but you actually get a higher quality of mentor network by keeping it volunteer. And there's a couple interesting reasons for that may not be self-evident. One is, if you ask a venture capitalist to sign a formal agreement, first of all, it's going to be a non-starter for them to sign a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement. They just won't do it, full stop. Second is, behind the scenes, they have contracts with their limited partners that would actually prevent them from receiving direct compensation. So at the end of the day, this informal relationship sort of surprisingly allows for an accelerator like MergeLane to get a higher quality of really the A-level mentors that you're going to want working with your companies. That's something that the research turned up that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. It makes sense, though. Great, thank you. So you kind of touched on this earlier, Brad, but another main benefit of these accelerators are actually the team that's working with the accelerator. So the people running the accelerator offer significant value to participating teams. I've seen this in working with other accelerators, such as Techstars, when I've had the opportunity to work with somebody like Nicole Glaros and to see what a half an hour with someone like her can do for a startup. And with MergeLane, I always tell people that the best thing about our program is having the opportunity to work with my partner, Sue. I think she's the most talented mentor that I've ever worked with, and she spends at least an hour with each of the teams. And then I've, spent the last 7 years working with early stage angel investors and building a network around that. And so it's been fun for me to be able to leverage that experience and that network for our accelerator. So Brad, you touched on this. Anything else you want to add about how the quality of the accelerator team impacts the experience of being an accelerator?
I think it's absolutely crucial. When I interview entrepreneurs about their experience in accelerators, probably the most important differentiators between positive and negative accelerator experiences is who was the managing director. And even within the same accelerator where there's a managing director change, people out of those cohorts where there's a rock star managing director, they love it. And where there was a managing director that was not as invested in the companies, they really did not feel like it was a good use of their time. And so for those who are kicking the tires on an accelerator experience, I would strongly recommend do your diligence on the managing director. And this makes sense because not only are they organizing the experience for you, but the mentors as well. And to the extent you want to get great mentors in the network, if you've got B players as managing directors, that's just not going to happen. I live here in Boulder. I've known Elizabeth and Sue for a long time. I am totally comfortable giving them a full recommendation. They get it. They've been around the startup scene a long time. They're experienced with respect to working with entrepreneurs, and they are A players that attract a really great group.
Well, thanks, Brad. And I promise we did not pay Brad to say that, but maybe we.
And just to be honest, I wouldn't say it if I didn't genuinely believe that. So it's very easy for me to say that.
Well, thanks. The next major benefit that accelerators have is helping companies to raise capital. So while only an estimated 1% of the companies who aspire to raise venture capital are successful in actually raising it, 59% of accelerator graduates raise follow-on funding, which I found to be pretty interesting. And from my experience as an investor, I can say that accelerators really increase a company's credibility among investors. And perhaps more importantly, they can really help companies address all of the issues that will not only help them get investment, but will also help them be successful as a business. Brad, do you have any research about accelerator graduates' ability to raise capital?
I have not been taking a close look at that, Elizabeth, so I don't want to overstate the case. I will say, first of all, that $25,000 on the front end or $20,000 is not a huge amount, but for certain entrepreneurs, that's transformative. So, for example, I spoke to a school teacher who went through an accelerator program. She's like, you know what? You may think that $20,000 wasn't a whole lot, but who in the right mind was going to give me $20,000 to give my company a chance at the outset? So that early stage oxygen can be very powerful for certain entrepreneurs. If you get into an accelerator program, raising capital is not something that's going to be automatic, right? So this is like a 2 to 3 month trial in which investors and entrepreneurs have a chance to see you work, have a chance to see you dynamically adapt based on what you learn. And the better you do in that program, the more those folks will be, first of all, willing to cut you a check, as well as vouch for you with investors who are out there. So you really want to view that 2 to 3 month period as a chance to make meaningful relationships with investors. I would encourage you to ask them for a lot of advice along the way. And there's a funny Jedi mind trick that by the time you ask them for advice and they get invested with their ideas in your company is about the time that they want to cut you a check at the end of the program.
Yeah, they also say ask for advice and you'll get money, and ask for money and you'll get advice. Funny how that works.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked a little bit about the benefits of an accelerator, but how do you determine whether it's actually right for you? So one of the things that you really want to look at is what are the network benefits? So as I mentioned earlier, the Accelerator Network is one of the greatest benefits of participating in an accelerator. And I've noticed that some entrepreneurs associate accelerators mainly with investor connections. But from my experience, I think that many businesses really benefit more from introductions to people like strategic partners and customers. And one of the mentors from our last cohort, for instance, made an introduction to a potential strategic partner who could be dramatically impactful and could actually be a potential acquirer for the company. And so just think about, some of the ways the introductions could really make a difference in your business, and use that when you are assessing accelerators to look beyond just the investor introductions. Anything to add there, Brad?
Among investment accelerators, you might think about two different types. One is a generalist investment accelerator. There you'd be talking about Y Combinator or Techstars. Another group is what I call affinity group accelerators, and those are accelerators that are bound by an additional cause beyond making money. And what I found in my research and talking to mentors is the affinity group accelerators provide the mentors a special motivation, a special inspiration that I think makes them passionate about helping the companies in a very particular kind of way. And my intuition is that their willingness, that is mentors' willingness to help companies in a program like MergeLane with outside parties, is probably going to be fueled by that special motivation. I think it's a particularly interesting aspect of MergeLane. We'll see how it pans out over the coming years, but I think you're going to see people who are willing to do a little bit extra in terms of expanding their network for their companies.
Yeah, we've really seen that. I've worked with a lot of the people who are mentors at MergeLane for a long time, and I've never seen them as engaged as they've been with MergeLane. And I think it's just because so many people really care about bringing more women into the startup community, and because they just see it as an investment opportunity to invest in women. Great.
And in terms of affinity group accelerators, there's also an accelerator called UpWest out of Silicon Valley that specializes in Israeli startup connections. Another affinity group out here in Boulder is called the Unreasonable Institute, which focuses on social entrepreneurs. When I talk to mentors in those networks, you just see a special kind of relationship and passion that it's got to be helpful in terms of opening up their network.
Yeah, I would agree. Great. Thanks, Brad. So another thing to consider as a business is the timing of when you might apply and join an accelerator. So we often find that potential applicants are sometimes hesitant to apply because they think they are either too early or too late for an accelerator. But from my experience, and Brad kind of touched on this earlier, it's not uncommon for really early or relatively later stage companies to participate. So this year, our MergeLane cohort ranged from pre-revenue to as much as a $2 million run rate. Some of our companies had raised meaningful capital before the program, and one of our companies closed $1.5 million in the first part of our program. So, Brad, do you have any research or anecdotal information regarding the variance of the stages of businesses that go through accelerators?
On the research front, I've not seen that. Anecdotally, yes. In fact, there's an emerging group of companies that are actually moving through multiple accelerators. I'll give you a good example. I spent the spring down in Santiago, Chile. Startup Chile is an accelerator that's funded by the government called Corfo is the agency. And when I spoke to companies at the demo day, literally every company that I spoke with was considering moving on next to an accelerator, most of them in the States, which was kind of an interesting phenomena. I will say this, that if you are a very early stage company, not necessarily an inexperienced entrepreneur, irrespective of your background, I think a generalist accelerator can be great because a serial entrepreneur, an investor, a functional specialist, all of those folks should be able to add value to your company. As certain companies get more mature, I would probably take a closer look at the mentor network to make sure there are people with expertise in your area, because as your company is getting further along and is scaling up, the level of specialized expertise in order to be helpful is just going to be greater. It's a different type of need that your company has than when it's at the earliest stages.
Great. I would second all of that. And I think any companies of any stage can really benefit from an accelerator. If your company is more in that idea phase, then an accelerator can be tremendously valuable in helping you gain clarity on your business and your product market fit. If you're more established, then as I mentioned earlier, you'll be better able to execute on the message and the advice that you're given. It really just depends on what you want to get out of the program. So another thing to consider is the investment of time. We often hear that startups think that they are just too busy to do an accelerator. And after working with several accelerators, this is kind of baffling to me because as an entrepreneur, I totally understand how hard it is to make time for anything other than keeping your business afloat. But I've also learned how important it is to be able to take a step back and look at your business from 100 different angles. So accelerators allow you to make room for innovation and game-changing shifts. And from my experience, these are really essential things for entrepreneurs to make a time for. But it is a time commitment. And from my experience, these programs are typically 3 to 6 months in duration. So MergeLane is a 12-week program, which is similar to most of the accelerators that I've worked with. Have you seen anything different in duration from your research, Brad?
Now, 3 to 6 months is right, with most of them being in the 3 to 4 month range. I would say this about investment of time. It is a significant commitment and will be bursty. I think that what MergeLane's done in order to accommodate different schedules is a really interesting innovation in the accelerator model. But in terms of investing time, another way to think about this is an accelerator can get you out of a bad idea that you might otherwise be spending much longer time on, and can help you either pull the plug on the thing or get yourself into a better product market fit. And from that perspective, yes, it's a bursty 3 months with an unusual intensity, but the time savings in terms of future consternation can be significant if it works.
Yeah, well said. And for those of you who may not know, so MergeLane is a 12-week program. 3 of the 12 weeks are in Boulder in residence, and then the 9 weeks in between are held virtually. And, I always tell people that are considering an accelerator, so the accelerator is investing in you as a business. And so we have a pretty substantial incentive to make sure that you can capitalize on opportunities as they come up. So if an unexpected trip to NYC needs to happen, or if you need to leave a session to meet with a strategic partner, obviously we want you to do that. So moving on, the other big thing to consider is the equity investment. So Brad, can you explain the typical accelerator investment structure? You touched on this briefly, but it'd be helpful to just kind of line that out.
Sure. So, and Elizabeth, you can refresh my recollection. How much do you guys give in exchange for equity?
It's $20,000, and we take a 6% equity stake.
Okay, so that's right in the sweet spot of what is market. So $20,000 going from the accelerator into the startup, and in exchange, the startup provides 6% of ownership over to the accelerator. I think the biggest point of confusion about this is one of valuation. This is not intended to be a valuation event for your company. If you do the math, if you've got 20,000 coming in on 6%, it's not going to result in a valuation that's probably what you think is market as a CEO. And that's why I underscore that the value of accelerators and the reason to get into it is ultimately going to be the expertise, the mentorship, and the network extension. The money can be helpful, but it's really not intended to be a valuation event for the company.
Yeah, well said. We tell people that really it's the $20,000 we offer is a very small portion of the value that we're offering in exchange for that 6%. And we look at it more as the value of the accelerator in exchange for 6%.
And in fact, for the companies involved, I assume that you guys do this, Elizabeth, as well. Typically, you as CEO will be discouraged from closing on a round during your time in the accelerator part of the theory of the case for that is that your valuation should be going up by virtue of the traction that you get in the accelerator, the connections that you make, and that you'll probably get a better terms for your round after completion of the accelerator than you would get during the course of it.
Yeah, we had a couple companies that were raising money as they were coming into the program, and some of them ended up closing on what they were raising and then raising a later round at a much higher valuation. But we saw a pretty significant jump in valuation, so I think that that's 100% right. Just one clarification. So MergeLane makes a $20,000 investment for any company that's accepted into the program. And then after you're accepted into the program, we make investments of up to about $100,000, depending on your progress and depending on your interest in that investment. And that investment is made on terms that are negotiated by us and by the company. We may participate in a round if you already have a round open, or we may actually lead that investment. And that's also very rare for accelerators. So some accelerator programs do offer an additional investment. So for instance, Techstars offers $100,000 in convertible debt. But it's the exception rather than the norm that accelerators offer that potential for additional investment. So before we open it up to Q&A, I just want to thank you for your time, Brad. And, someone had mentioned that they were hoping that you would introduce yourself again because they missed that. Could you quickly do that?
Sure, delighted to. My name is Brad Bernthal. I'm at CU Boulder. I'm an associate professor of law. My specialty areas are entrepreneurial policy, as well as teaching students how to work with startups. And my research interests currently surround investment accelerators.
Great. Thanks, Brad. So if you are a company with at least one female in leadership, and we've convinced you of the value of an accelerator, we'd love for you to apply for MergeLane. Our applications are going to be open on September 1st, and this is very important. We're doing rolling admission. So please, please, please apply as soon as possible. We have a couple other On-Ramp Live events coming up, and we also have some opportunities for you guys to pitch your business to us and a MergeLane information session. You can find all of those at mergelane.com/events. And we will be hosting events all throughout the year for both male and female entrepreneurs and investors. And thanks for your time today. So at this point, we are just past halfway. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. If you could just unmute yourself when you want to ask a question, that would be great. And if you can't get in and you want to do something via chat, that's just fine as well. Okay. So one question is, what if my company only has one founder? Great question. So accelerators do often prefer companies that have more of a team versus a single founder. But I would definitely still suggest applying if you are a single founder. So sometimes the strength of the single founder and our perceived notion of their ability to recruit other founders will get us over that hump. Other questions?
Yeah, I'll just add that for what it's worth, anecdotally, the teams do a lot better than the individuals over time, in my experience. And for those of you who are going it alone, I think your most important early sale is to convince someone else that your idea is worth pursuing and going all in with. That is just crucial to pick up somebody else to go with you, in my estimation.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, both as someone who's invested in a lot of companies and someone who's made the mistake of trying to go at it alone myself. I do think that the most important sale is a co-founder. So we also have a question, how many cohorts do we do per session? So we do one program per year, and we're going to take 10 programs for that, or 10 companies for that program. So our next program starts February 1st of 2016. And the reason why we only do one per year is because we really understand the value of our mentor network. And when we start to do more per year, it makes the mentor is a little bit tired and we start to see mentor fatigue. Just a second. Great questions. You guys are coming in quickly here. So, does the list of mentors change? I imagine it's always evolving. Would you actively recruit a mentor for a company if you accept a company that needs specific expertise? Fantastic question. So our list of mentors on our website is pretty indicative of the mentors that are going to be involved in our program. However, yes, life happens and mentors come in and out. We're meeting people every day, so we continue to add people. And, some of our highest profile mentors actually prefer to not be on our website. So just keep that in mind as well. And then as far as recruiting mentors to meet a specific need, yes. If there's a company that is in an industry where we don't have a strong mentor base, which it would be hard to find that industry, but it might exist, we would find someone with specific expertise. But one interesting thing that we've found is that mentor industry expertise is not actually the greatest indicator of how well of a match they'll be as a mentor. So some of our best mentor relationships were with companies that were in a space such as apparel, who worked with a mentor that had a really strong SaaS background. A lot of it is really about chemistry. And Brad, feel free to jump in if you want to add to anything I mentioned.
Yeah, Elizabeth mentioned the number of mentors who had reached out and wanted to be part of MergeLane. And in terms of high prestige, high functioning accelerators, that's typically what you see, where the mentors are approaching the accelerator more often than the accelerator approaching the mentors. As a CEO, if I'm considering an accelerator, I would prefer to have an accelerator that's sort of been trusted relationships that the accelerator is curating, as opposed to going out and begging people to join.
Great. So we have another viewer who is also a single founder, and she or he is wondering if they could use MergeLane as a way to develop a strategic team. And yes, I think that is possible. As Brad said, your first sale is to co-founders, and one of the things that we look for when we're accepting companies is their ability to convince other smart people to take a big giant leap to believe in their idea. So just be thinking about that as you go along. But with our first cohort at MergeLane, we saw a lot of teams bring in new team members as a result of the connections that they made through the accelerator. So for instance, one of our teams just brought on a CFO who was a mentor with them prior to working with them.
So plus one on that, Elizabeth. And if you go back to that point I was making early on about accelerators as validators for a company, one phenomenon that you'll see is a couple co-founders start in the accelerator, and that becomes a legitimizing factor for someone else to convince their spouse that he or she is all into the company, or others to come on board. I think that's where you see it. Usually there's a core team that's already involved. Getting into the accelerator and making progress entices others to come on board from there.
Great, thanks. Another question is, do I have to be physically in the accelerator for the 2 weeks of full time in February? So yes, that's our in-person time, and it's pretty critical that you be here. However, a lot of our participants last year had small children, and so they flew back for the weekends. And then a couple of our participants had things that happened that were huge opportunities for their companies, and they missed a couple days of those 2 weeks. But as a general note, it is pretty important, because a lot of what you get out of the accelerator is the experience of working with the other teams in the cohort, and having that 2 weeks to really form that bond is pretty important.
Speaking to mentors, I spoke to a few mentors that are in purely virtual accelerators, and their feedback was it is not the same. So if you're a participant in this, I would strongly recommend take advantage of that face time while you can get it. And then when you go to a virtual environment, it's already a personal relationship that's been made in person. I think it's super powerful.
Yeah, plus one on that. And just so you know how it logistically works, so in the first 2 weeks, we have a lot of programs planned, but we also have one-on-one meetings with the mentors. So you meet with about 40 mentors in your first 2 weeks, and out of those 40, you choose the 5 who you're most interested in working with throughout the entire program. So it's pretty critical to be part of that. Next question, and just a reminder to mute if you're not asking a question. At what stage are most of the companies that participate in your accelerator? So it was really a range. We had a couple companies that were pre-revenue and were pretty early. We had a couple companies with material revenue, as much as a $2 million run rate, and had raised as much as $1.5 million in capital. Is there a certain type of company that MergeLane mentors are best suited to help? So tech versus product. So we really had a broad range last year, and we had applicable mentors for all of those companies. So last year we had an apparel company, we had a food company, we had a consumer product company, we had a couple B2B SaaS companies, e-commerce companies, and we were able to find mentors with relevant experience with all of those. So I think it would be hard pressed to find a company that we couldn't make a match for. But with that said, Boulder is really a hotbed for the food industry, especially the natural food industry. And we also have a lot of software and security data as well here. Anything to add on the Boulder community there, Brad?
If you wind me up about Boulder and startups, it'll probably go for a couple hours. I'll just say that, if you think about world-class places to start a business, the list is going to be Silicon Valley, Boston, New York, Research Triangle, Austin, Seattle, and Boulder. And which of those is not like the others? Our little hamlet of $150,000 people just punches way above its weight in terms of a long history in, as Elizabeth alluded to, storage, natural foods, software, outdoors, craft brewing. I mean, this is the kind of place where people regularly say there are 10 billion people on the planet. I've got the best idea, and others say, of course you do. It's a weird place that's special for creatives.
Yeah, and I'd add biotech to that as well. We've got a growing space of that. And one thing to point out too, so our network is not just in Boulder. We have mentors all over the country. And one of the things that makes that interesting is if you're a company in New York, not only will we connect you with the Boulder startup community, but we'll also connect you with mentors in New York. So I'm not totally sure what this question is asking, but do folks recommend completing an incubator before entering an accelerator? So an incubator is more of a place-based program typically, and so that is not required. I would recommend getting any resources you can, and as a startup entrepreneur, whatever help you can find, the better. And we definitely look at that in the application process. So like I said before, if you can prove that you've convinced other smart people, if they're advisors, if they're other pitch competitions and things like that, to believe in your idea, it really improves your credibility.
Yeah, I would say in my experience, incubators have tremendous variance, where it can range from everything from essentially you pay for a little bit of space to a real structured program with meaningful help along the way. I would just do my diligence on what the incubator is, talk to other companies that have come through and spent time there, and be eyes wide open about what you're going to get versus what you're not going to get. Another place that you can co-locate with other entrepreneurs is co-working spaces are, I think, an important phenomena, and a place where there's a lot of information sharing across companies. And the bottom line, if you're doing a startup, is you've got an idea and one very narrow part of expertise within your company. You need all sorts of help outside of it. And so you want to put your company in situations where you can get that outside help to support the resources you have within your little organization.
Absolutely. And just 2 more points of clarification, which should answer the next 2 questions. So Our program is based in Boulder, but it's a 12-week program. The first 2 weeks you spend in Boulder. The last week of the program you spend in Boulder. The remaining 9 weeks can be spent anywhere you choose. And then we take companies anywhere in the country, and we also consider companies outside of the U.S. as well. So please apply. What is our stance on DPOs, and does the MergeLane program match with this fundraising strategy? I'm not sure what DPOs are. Do you know what DPOs are?
I'm guessing that the acronym here, Elizabeth, is a direct public offering. So,
okay.
Yeah, there's a clarification. And so I think we might be able to expand this question to how are MergeLane or other companies in the area using, say, crowdfunding or electronic mechanisms to raise funding there, and is that something that you're using to lever up fundraising?
Yeah, great question. So, there's two different kinds of crowdfunding. There's equity-based crowdfunding, and then there's rewards-based crowdfunding. With rewards-based crowdfunding, we are 100% proponents of that. So with that, you're getting market validation for your product. You're showing that you can convince people that there's something interesting to buy, and it's non-dilutive funding. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's some great articles on rewards-based crowdfunding. I would just Google that. The equity-based crowdfunding, I'm a little skeptical still, because I think that there's some potential headaches that companies are going to run into by doing that, and I could have a whole webinar on that. That's just my personal take, but it would in no way preclude companies from being involved in MergeLane because they did an equity-based crowdfund. And really, again, it's more validation for your program.
So a couple quick thoughts there. One is that under the Jobs Act, crowdfunding should get easier from a securities perspective, but the Securities and Exchange Commission has not yet passed the rules and regulations around what should really make that happen. So this remains a promise to be seen in the coming years, but for purposes of today, I just think the SEC has not really unleashed what could happen there. For those who are considering it, I would just be very careful about bringing in multiple investors into your cap table too early in the program. If you're going to do something through crowdfunding, I'd try to have those investors come in as one investor in a single LLC vehicle to keep your cap table clean. The reason for that, among other things, is that will be much better optics if you try to later raise money, say, with an institutional investor like a venture capitalist.
Yeah, great advice. And just actually one quick thing. So one of the issues that we have with is MergeLane, and I'm guessing other accelerators have this problem too, is the way that our fund is structured. Our fund is an LLC, and our LLC does not have more than $5 million in assets because we raise funds for the particular program. And so because of that, all of the investors in our LLC have to verify their accreditation in order to invest in a general solicitation and a DPO. So that's pretty problematic for us if we were going to participate in the same round. And that's just one of the things that comes up that's the fine print that people don't unwind until they start to look into this. But yeah, certainly determined on all of this. So beyond possible added investments, how does MergeLane continue to support your companies after graduation as 6% stakeholders? Great question. This comes up a lot. So, we support our companies in a couple different ways. So the first and perhaps the most impactful is, we're matching you with mentors that often will have a continued relationship with you, either as continued mentors or, in some cases, you find someone who you really want to have more involved in your program and they might join you more formally. And so, my partner Sue and I and our program director Hannah, we are very involved with the companies after they graduate, but we know that we're only 3 people and we have a certain number of companies that we're involved with. So we make introductions to people that we know and trust and we know will be valuable to your company so that we can really enhance our bandwidth. And then, as far as us individually and how we stay involved, so I've been very involved with most of the team in their capital raise because that's really my background after graduation. My partner Sue, she deals more on the operations side of the business, so she works more in all aspects of customer acquisition, branding, business strategy, and she's been pretty involved. And it's really, we want our companies to ask us for help and to have us involved as much as possible. And it's really just a matter of how much you want us to be involved.
I'll quickly interject. Pretty common for accelerator companies to remain in contact with somewhere between 1 and 3 mentors. Sometimes those relationships get formalized, that someone comes on board as a board of director or as an advisory board member. But that's pretty common in terms of ongoing relationships post-accelerator. Another very interesting phenomena emerging is the alumni network of accelerators. And again, I'll go back to the fact that MergeLane is an affinity group accelerator where people are there with a common cause. My bet is as MergeLane goes forward, the alumni are going to feel a lot of goodwill and will come back year over year to help the next cohort. But that remains to be seen.
Yeah, we're already seeing it. We haven't started a cohort, but our next webinar in half hour, one of our participants is participating in that, and then one of our founders participated in our New York event, and they're very interested and willing to help. And then also the companies that you participate with will be helpful as well.